Welcome, everyone, to the Regeneration Podcast. I'm Mike Sauter with you, and this week we're not blessed to have our Goomba, our compadre, Michael Martin. He called me this morning. His mother is, who lives with him, is dying, he says, as he speaks. So, those of the praying types offer up a prayer for Michael and his mom during this time. I know he feels really graced and blessed that she was able to live with them. I forget how many years, but I'm sure Michael will be back next week. And so I'm here with a friend of the podcast. This will be the fourth time that we've had Dr. Guido Preparata on. The last time we spoke, I was on this side of the pond and Guido was in Rome. Since that time, I took a mad dash trip to Italy, planes, trains, automobiles, and more, to get to Bolsena and a Franciscan monastery up above the town of Bolsena on Lake Bolsena. And we had a kind of a conference. And Guido, you've moved from Rome to what town in Italy now with your family?
I'm in Umbria, in the region of Umbria. The city is called Città di Castello. It's further up. We're very close to Tuscany.
Okay.
It's beautiful.
Bolsena was beautiful. Is where you're living now.
Indeed.
Also beautiful. Yeah. That felt like Umbria.
Yeah,
we were in Lazio, right? But it felt kind of like the Umbrian hills.
Yeah. No, the countryside of Lazio is spectacular.
Yeah.
We had a great time.
Yeah, great time. How about a little bit like in Italy? We're going to talk, I'll tease it right now. We're going to talk about the Canon. But living in Italy, over here on this side of the pond, again, people are talking about your new Prime Minister, Meloni. What would you want your American listeners? Is this a real deal? Is it another Orban? How is it similar? How is it different?
It's a good question. From superficially, it seems it's going to be major changes, and I know a lot of people voted her as a response to very much in a Trumpian frame of mind, enough postmodern hypocrisy and all of these things, and the fact that she's a woman and all of that also makes it appealing from their viewpoint, from these electors' viewpoint. I mean, she's a seasoned politician now. She's a young woman, but she's been around and playing the game for a very long time. I don't know. Most of us who are skeptical, we think that nothing's going to change because in Italy, what's meant to change? I mean, we're a Club Med country for the empire. I mean, we are irrelevant, and ever more so after the end of the Cold War. And they say that she's one of those young politicians. Used to come from a very young generation of right-wing people. So I don't know. There's been rumors, and people have voiced their concerns that, oh my goodness, fascism is back. But they do this all the time. Whenever there's one of those guys that there was the mayor of Rome a number of years ago, same crowd. Yeah, and everybody, oh my goodness, we're going to have the black shirts again. It's complete nonsense. No, what is certain is that she's been blessed by the U.S. Then they're all pro NATO, so I don't think anything's going to change. I'll be curious to see if anything is going to change.
Yeah, at our little gathering, it was quite diverse in one sense, but there was most were Italians, but I wasn't shocked. But there was a self-identity that like everybody was aware that the number of NATO bases in Italy and so forth, and you probably can't get elected prime minister unless you're crowned by NATO in some way. Is that your sense?
Yeah, I mean,
yeah,
sure.
Yeah, so you're not expecting radical change there?
No.
Yeah.
No. I think I told you the story. I spoke years ago. I got in touch with a group of people that was not in Italy, elsewhere, people who were sympathetic with a dialogue with Russia. And so through these people, I was put in contact with one member of parliament, young member of parliament that comes from the, I think, exact same kind of milieu as Meloni, of these, people on the right. And they're the ones who actually, but not only them, keep a dialogue with Russia. but there are also people on the left who do that. I mean, people all over the place. And so I remember I said, it'd be nice to have this Eurasian dialogue, and let's make this Eurasian thing. And so we've been chatting, and then this guy looks at me and he says, you understand nothing of politics, do you? And I told him, no, I really don't. Why don't you enlighten me? And he said, and so it was kind of a surreal conversation, because in the end, they belong to a group that dialogues with Russia. And so I am indeed a naive guy. I mean, I'm not a politician in any sense. And I was just, yeah, let's do that. No, the Russians are Europeans there. We should be talking to them, and so on and so forth. Anyway, he said, if we do that, if we really start to do things with them, the Americans are gonna start literally bombing us. So you should shut up.
That makes it very clear, right?
No, and so he treated me like a stupid child.
Yeah, right.
Which, fine. But then the question in my head was, what's the point of even having your little conferences? And so if that's how it really is, why don't you just, so what is it, for show? Is it part of the theater, of the theatrical production? But this is how it is. So when everybody talks and you want to be part of those kind of alternative movement or the anti-system movement that root for Putin and so on, not that I'm anywhere close to these guys, but I know a lot of them. It's fine. You do that, you write this, and you have all these articles about the Silk Road, and let's do this and let's do that, and this a counterweight.
Echoes of Pepe Escobar right there. Sure. Exactly.
Yeah. And the counterweight to Anglo-American arrogance and so on. So we join hands with our American brothers who are tired of the tyranny at home, with their Eurasian and European brothers on this side of the pond along the Silk Road, and all this nonsense. So, yeah. And so long as you do all that, and you have all these conferences, the anti-NATO, they have little, again, anti-NATO gigs going on in Italy. There's like a traveling circus. We have gone through that as well. It's fine.
Yeah.
But what this young MP, I don't know what's become of him. I've never heard of him anymore, but he was at the time when Berlusconi was prime minister. Berlusconi, big friend of Putin's, by the way.
Sure.
So so people were thinking, wow, so we might do something. But it goes to show that whatever game they're playing is one thing, and this idea of really meaning to do something and bringing Russia in our midst in Europe and build forget it. It's like it's an absolute no-no. And I took him at his word when he said, they're being business, So if you want to play and pretend, good. But if this is my reading, didn't say that. This is my reading of this word.
Yeah, no.
So
it's different definitions of what parlor radicalism, right?
Well, I mean, we're a colony. People say that all the time. We're a colony. We're a colony. We're a colony. But then follow this argument to its logical conclusions, and then you realize that a colony is not destined to be anything. Colony is a colony.
Fascinating. So I don't know if I can make a good segue there, but you're saying this type of talk of a certain kind of radical fringe is limited by, it's a subset because it's limited by a larger, much more powerful kind of meta narrative. And I think if today's topic is the canon, and I've read, we've talked about this a little bit, but an article that I'll use as a touchstone is, should we Sicilianize our Weltgeschichte? That's the funniest article titled in your corpus, leafing through Jaja in search of the meaning of society, power, and conspiracy. Anyhow, in that article, you kind of call into question huge elements of the whole Western canon, and then in our correspondence, I know I'm not going to embarrass you here. At one point, we were talking about the canon in our correspondence, and you said, so what? Ditch Dante and Shakespeare? Ditch, no, but make room for sure. Ditch Plato and all them Greeks? ? Not entirely, no, but criticize and push them aside for sure. Ditch Rousseau for sure. St. Thomas, you bet. And send to hell pretty much everybody else. We can do it a true renaissance. That's classic vintage Preparata. And, so I think setting the stage for this talk on the canon, which can be quite radical, there's two issues, and I think you do this in your article, and and I'll have you talk more about your article about like a Leonardo Jaja and so forth. But I think in order to reshuffle the canon, two things become apparent when you're talking to you, Guido Preparata. One is theodicy, and the other is power. So with the realm, I'm going to piece those apart a little bit. Power seems to be your focus, first of all, and I've done this in an interview with you that we did for Front Porch Republic, which many people have watched. Power versus the economy, power, which is the driving force, you know, and where is the study of power right now? And then we'll go into theodicy a little bit.
It's a huge question. Yeah,
It is,
you're reading that email. Yes, it's my supermarket iconoclasm. But you know, I'm sure that you've had the same experience, right? We went through school, we went through catechism, and then we kind of reach more or less grievously or reluctantly adulthood, and then you're in the world and you realize that 90% of what you've been told is either completely useless or completely it's not being applied. And you're like out there like a moron doing, well, you know, you're not supposed to do that, or, you know, this doesn't make any sense. And everybody looks at you going, shut up. You know, this is how it is. And you wonder, how did it become so wise? How come I'm the only moron in the room who still thinks you should do this, you should do that? This is what they taught us to do.
How did everybody become so wise?
Yeah, and so catechism, zero, you know, completely useless. You go into the real world and like nobody follows it. So, okay, that's catechism. Now, not to repeat the million things we've said about school, 90% of what you learn, we're talking about Paul Simon, right? I quoted that song. I remember it was with you guys about the crap we learned in high school. Exactly. And so 90% of what you read in high school, what you study in high school and middle school is all junk anyway. The history books, junk. And so math, you know, well, it's logic. Yeah, it's very poorly taught. So, I mean, you come out with these diplomas and you're, I don't know, you don't know anything. And so I said to myself, I said, you know, and then you go to university, but it's the same thing when you study philosophy in high school. Yeah, you're good. So what have you read? Well, I've read Aristotle, Plato, Rousseau, Machiavelli, Hegel, and then and I don't know, and then the others. Okay, you're good. You're an educated person. I mean, if you sustain the examinations and you've proven your worth and you're capable of, you know, reciting what they're about, you're an educated person. No, you're not. You're just you're a complete fool, doesn't know anything.
Yeah.
Rousseau. I mean, so that's where that Shasha piece comes from. And as I was telling you, the only author that was interesting for me that amongst these Italians was Lombroso, the criminologist, and his son-in-law, Ferrero, was also a talented poetologist. I mean, not a giant like Veblen, but he wasn't bad. And they were the only ones, and I thought, finally, that said, you know, I said, what about all these classics that we Italians study? And I discussed this with you too.
Yeah.
You know, the Latin, the Greco-Romans, and Greek myth, and all of that. It's impregnated with violence and blood and violation. It's disgusting. And even if it has some deeper layers of truth in a lot of those myths, which there are, of course, but the delivery is so completely drenched in blood. And then we complain that our societies are violent, and so it went back to this discussion I have. How are we really raised? We're raised with a lot of myth that is extremely violent. All our tales, the Grimm fables, are grim and full of, you know, and we all know it's all about violation and it's sexual perversions, adulterated and Bowdlerized and covered, and so on. And so and also power. You were saying, you know, you want to understand once you've grown up, you want to understand what kind of world you live in. And when you go into the social sciences, they don't do that. They don't want you to understand how it works. And then you say, well, they don't want to teach me how it works, but I'm an educated man because I read Plato, I read all of these it's a dead white guys
It's
as
exactly
the
how it
professors
works. We say, I read them, so I must be educated. Go ahead. Yeah.
No, you know how the professors in American universities says, well, I'll teach dead white guys. On the one hand, they make themselves postmodern appealing by berating what they teach, but that's exactly the kind of, canon they uphold. And so when you hear somebody say that, just guarantee that that person doesn't know squat about anything. But like the vast majority of people who've gone through the same kind of training. And I said, you know what? And people say, oh, read Dante's, in Dante's, there's this beautiful canto about the usury. And there's very deep pages of economics in Aristotle. And deep. In Dante, there's nothing. Aristotle, there's a little. And Plato, there's a little. Absolutely zero in the medieval and theological tradition. I mean, they've been hammering us about usury, and they never thought about how to vanquish it in any way other than prohibiting, for example. So anyway, to make a long story short, I said, what would really happen if we were to ditch all this stuff? People, what? Wait, are you mad? You're going to ditch Dante? It's sublime. Yeah, I'm sure. I mean, he's like an amazing poet, but as far as I'm concerned, if I want to understand the nature of power and theodicy, that is why there is violence in a world created by an allegedly benevolent God, I don't know what to do with these guys, truly.
So factual. Yeah. So a little more, because you mentioned theodicy. What do you see? I'm Catholic. One thing is maybe an anecdote that kind of jives with your kind of wake up experience. I remember I graduated from undergrad, and I was in a conversation with my dad about like affirmative action or something. Then I heard myself say, "Shut up, Dad. I took a course in like social stratification." Then I realized how vacuous that sounded. I was just trying to, and then, so when I worked in a factory, third shift, it's called Century Safes, taking cement off fireproof safes for about 3 years, and I let my mind clear, right? But I realized in trying to like say I took a class in something, the distance between that and having anything meaningful to say, it just hit me in the face. And it was really in my life's biography, a seminal moment that I realized how dumb I am. Now working within, go ahead. Yeah.
But you realize that at an age, after, because you've studied though. I mean, and some of us have studied a lot.
Yeah.
And having studied a lot in those years meant that you didn't have as much fun as you wanted to have.
No, in one sense, I didn't study. I would say I never read a book until, say, boring books kill the brain, right? And the good thing for me, I went to less than 1/3 of my classes total. I don't know if you'd call it cheating. I suppose it was in a sense, but I got to be honest. Like if I took a class in humanities, I would take out all the Encyclopedia Britannica Colliers and read about Dostoevsky, right? And then I'd read enough pages of the Brothers Karamazov or something, right? And I could pass my humanities test. But I don't think, I didn't even buy the books for most classes, because I was pretty gifted at seeing the game. So when I took to writing, and there's a hero in my life, which I'll do a whole show on one time, a Hungarian novelist, Stephen Vizinci. A Hungarian novelist, Stephen Vizinci.
Yeah. You told me about it.
Yeah, that all of a sudden I read something by him and it just electrified me. And then he wrote back to me, talk about Michael Martin's mom going through this. My mom was terminally ill at the time. And so the world I wanted truth. And we had some correspondence, and he thought it was good that I had almost never read books when I was younger. So I've almost never read a book that really just dulled my brain, Well,
then you're fortunate, and you've been a lot smarter than fortunate, and you've been a lot smarter than people like me who, we're just really, my dad, and a lot of pressure to do well, and then realize, at a certain age that you just can't face the fact that you've just you threw away so many precious hours and days of your life in studying stuff that's completely worthless.
Yeah.
So I don't know if it's some kind of an act of Freudian rebellion or whatever, but it is also is this, but not so much against my parents, but against what the system wants you to do. And I said to myself, for me, I would take all this stuff and set fire to it, because in the end, who cares? Oh, it's beautiful. It's beautiful language, beautiful verses. Yeah, okay. Well, then let the poets keep them. For my part, I would set fire to them without thinking twice, because they don't help my investigation in the least.
Right. And let me,
So this is why
most of our listeners know too, but I want to mention your dad also ran, he was even a renegade. He was in his own way, an iconoclast, but a physicist of world importance at that time, Giuliano Preparata. So it's not that your dad was just forcing you into a boring school. He was trying to give you
and he saw himself also as some kind of an anarchist, but it's not true. He was very also bound to the beehive, as we say. He was. But whatever, and that's his story. And of course, it had repercussions on what I did, but in a way, in a good way, because I thought, all right, this is why I turned to Sciascia. Sciascia is, in Italy, he's a big name. He's a big name, but nobody would think of equating him with, I don't know, Dante.
Right. Not that. And I want to spell his last name for people if they don't know him. Leonardo. When I'll be honest, talk about ignorant. I said Sciascia, but Sciascia, Leonardo Sciascia.
Yeah, Sciascia. Yeah, it's a name of Arabic derivation, because the Arabs were in Sicily, and they passed on many things, stayed there. But I mean, he's an Italian author and big, very well known, and very high, respectable novelist of Italian 20th century literature. But so, okay, compared to Dante, you would say certainly he's a minor, whatever. And so, okay, but for me, there was more to be learned about power in him than there is in Dante or many others. Not that what you find in him is extraordinarily, but overall, there's enough to build a story or a stratum of, or if you want a bedrock on which we can walk and start looking around, begin to understand things. And so
I think you seized up there a little bit. You'll come back. There you go. Yep.
And this is a discussion that I had with many friends, and I said, when you walk into a library or in a flea market and you see all those books, what guarantee do you have that of all these books that have been published decades and decades and decades ago of names that you've never heard, what guarantee do you have that there's not more truth in those than in all the crap that they forced you to read? And the answer is none. And so you never know. And then who knows? Maybe some Romanian dude in the 1910s wrote a sociology tract that 25 people know that has all the mysteries revealed in it. Why the hell not? It could very well be. And moreover, the fact that this is like the Council of Nicaea or the Council of Constantinople. It's the fathers of the church that tell you what to believe. Now they're going to tell you what to believe, what kind of shape the belief has to take. They will tell you how you yourself are made spiritually, and so on and so forth. And why should I believe them? Mm-hmm. And same thing happens with building curricula. It's fathers of the church that tell you what constitutes goods that make an educated man or woman, right? It's what they say that you have got to read. But what if I want to challenge their authority? And what if I think that all these bibliographies they've put together are absolutely worthless and I would not salvage a single title out of them?
Right.
And the reason is, as even I was reading Savonarola's, like the Dominican crazy.
I love that.
Dominican crazy. No, crazy. That Dominican, let's call him stalwart, who tried to give the Florentines a constitution. And one of the things he said, I mean, it is very coarse. I mean, it's not highly sophisticated, but he says a few things here and there. And he said, and amongst the things, and I want to write about this at some point, but amongst the things he says, they don't want you to understand how it works. Mm-hmm. He says that plainly. The Lord, the one who is the tyrant, has it's not that he has any inclination. He doesn't want you to know how the machine works. Now, think of this and think of professors that are called by in state commissions to draw up a textbook, okay? And so you have every right to say, you know what? I'm not going to read this pile of junk.
No, agreed. What was I going to say? Oh, and then so let's go to theodicy again. Like, it's got to be one of the central questions in history. And you're somebody who's worked at the Pontifical Gregorian um, University, and you just think the whole attempt in the whole history of, say, the Catholic Church to deal with this question has been lame from the get-go, right? And that's one of your reasons. You say, if nobody's actually ever apprehended this question or giving it a serious whack that can illuminate things, we have to really question the canon. Say more about that.
Yeah, it's my usual. For me, it's the most important. So I was expecting. You would expect that people who devote themselves, the believers who devote themselves to, who have the luxury of spending their days reading, writing, thinking, and teaching, and so on and so forth, would devote 100% of their energy to attempting to understand this problem of evil within what allegedly they, as this allegedly told us, is the design of a good God. Which is the question that's been driving most philosophers into all sorts of dead ends or weird avenues, because it is so difficult, and it's more than difficult. It's existentially impossible to attempt
Agreed.
to find a way around. So
yeah. So, but you would claim that to an outsider or many people within the Western fold or the Catholic Church, probably with trite phrases like privy bonum, that evil is the absence of the good. We just bury the problem and move on, right? And the edifices, presumably, that we build upon those jargonesque false understandings are never questioned. Do you think that's kind of an accurate statement?
no, it's a difficult question. I don't think I know the answer. The impression I had was that they didn't talk about it at all. They were, and as a Catholic and a person who reads extensively, much better what Catholic theologians say about this. And I've only cursorily read or heard the people at the time at the university talk, and I don't know what they're talking about. It's completely
yeah.
I have no notion of why they would discuss it. A lot of them were really into Heidegger, being and not being, and I'm thinking, what does that have to do? I mean, the story of Christ on the cross is a powerful story, which is, again, it oozes blood and badness all around. Mm-hmm. So you have a good starting point right there to start thinking about what does that signify? Not to mention the whole story of Christianity itself, about that is supposedly God, and so what is it? God commits suicide. I mean, it leads to, once you follow it through, I mean, it takes you in all sorts of directions that are on all sorts of corridors that are disturbing ones. Absolutely. And so you get into really dangerous material, which is generally not much discussed in a university hall. Yeah. But yeah, I was expecting them to, and so I did. And in my classes, I took them there. And it's not that they wouldn't want to go there. They listened, the young seminarians listened with interest, but you could see that I was just beckoning them to come into the room, figuratively speaking, that they would nod, that they would understand, but that the flow was taking them elsewhere, and that they could give me a passing nod and sympathize, but it was not going to be.
Yeah. So let's begin. Let's talk a little bit about Plato. I don't know all that much. I'm going to mention a book, Catafalque, by this guy, Peter Kingsley. I've mentioned him to you, Carl Jung and the End of Humanity. He's a world-class scholar of the pre-Socratics, but I don't know what you're going to say about Plato, but he's going to think it all went wrong. I think it's from the Sophist. He can quote one of these tales that these yarns that kind of Plato spins. And for Kingsley, it feels like we all get kind of trapped in these things and we take them as reality. But there's a reference made about killing Father Parmenides. And for Kingsley, that is very evocative, because he'll want to say in his different books that, like, all of logic, which comes from Empedocles and Parmenides, these kind of poems that we find, which involve like meetings with Persephone in the dark underworld and kind of dying before you die, that fragments from these poems become the edifice of logic and Greek conceptual thought. And that, for him, Plato, he gets into this language. There's ultimate clarity. It was dark, a meeting of the underworld with the divine feminine, and these people came out enlightened. Then it went to these people who kind of spun yarns, and they used lots of like qualifying things. Something can kind of be true and not true at the same time and everything. And this guy, Peter Kingsley, who can find online, he says, whoa, that's heavy. And I want to make a comparison with that to another hero of mine who's not a professional academic, but really a novelist. And his name was Jean Sullivan. He wrote in France, died in a car wreck. But he even began to see that Greek conceptual thought, that this thing that the Eastern Church, when they want to beat up on the Western Church, they love their continuity with, this Greek marriage to the Gospels. But Sullivan, who studied an anthropologist, a Jesuit, Marcel Jousse, Joussc, but really looked at, the Syrian Gospel and Aramaic gestural, the world. But that Greek conceptual thought, when that kind of colonized the Gospel, that we took a detour there. But so in your correspondence with me, you're saying Plato problems, let's not ditch it all. What's your beef with Plato, Guido? We're going to go through some of the canon. We're just going to kind of pick your brain for a little bit. I think this will be fun for our listeners.
No, I mean, who am I? Who am I to attack Plato? I'm a nobody. No, I'm just saying that he hasn't helped me a great deal in understanding things. But no, of course, there's lots that's really interesting. Certainly as far as his laws are interesting. The Republic, not so much. Everybody talks about the Republic and the custodians and then the communism of women and all that. And then the book really bored me to death. And I thought the laws are better. So where he was designing, in fact, a more flexible community. And there was no communism of resources. There were forecasts for groupings, and he also set maximum limits for wages, and said interesting things about money. About distinguishing between a gold standard and a non-gold standard, and so it was. And then about how to run the city, and the laws has all that. And I think it's a much more interesting book than the Republic. I think he wrote it afterwards, if I'm not mistaken.
So instead of standing up just under Plato, just submissive under Plato, let's engage with the guy, is what you're saying. Huh?
No. I mean, he belong. You got to know him. If you want to be part of sure. But for our purposes, I don't think he helps us. It's like Leibniz. He's another complete genius, but his book on theodicy is pathetic. It's like don't even write, don't even try to write a book like that unless you really know what you're doing.
What's the title of his book on theodicy?
Yeah, he's written the treatise on theodicy to argue that you can reconcile the two, but it fails miserably. Miserably. And so, and this is Leibniz, right? Not exactly a lightweight. And so, yeah, we're talking about, and not only a mathematical genius, he was an inventor, and just a giant. But I want to deal with theodicy, and so with Plato and all of these people that physicists and students of science revere, it's because, of course, it's more with him. It's more about the dialogue with Apollo, right? Not with Dionysus. Apollo is math. Apollo is rigor. But what all of that helps you with is in contemplating the cosmos, like the space in which we live, which is a creation. It's assembled by a mathematical mind, the great geometrician or God or whatever, God. And it's extremely sophisticated, and only very few people with high mental capacities can penetrate the formulas for just the book of nature, is what Galileo said. It's written in math and in geometry, and you got to be able to read it. If you're a super talent like me, Galileo says, I'll explain to you how it is, and you continue in that tradition, and we learn from these books, and that's great. So that world, the Apollonians, they're okay, because for them, and physicists get really enraptured, because once they figure out how matter is constructed, and certainly or some of the greatest, then you get into the very small spaces, and you got all the, the quantum dynamics and all of that. And so they penetrate all that. And I don't know if I'm repeating myself, but
no.
For them in the Apollonian world, you can verify things. Mm-hmm. And these people get exalted because with their mind, they put themselves, or they discover blueprints that make them feel, and they do feel capable of dialoguing with God himself, right? I can figure out how you, the carpenter of the universe, has put this thing together. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's huge, right? And it is huge, and they devote their lives to that. And I appreciate and I revere that. But for us, within this stage, which is built with extremely sophisticated materials and assembled in incredible ways, which physicists uncover little by little throughout centuries, there are committed abominations. Uh-huh. This is where we come in.
Yeah.
And we're not, I speak for myself. I'm not a scientist, and I love what you scientists do. But my question is not so much about, the theory of matter, what makes the stage, which is a career in itself. What preoccupies me is the abominations that are consummated daily on the very stage.
Yeah.
And to that, the physicist doesn't have anything to respond, or the Apollonian gazer. He can have beautiful stories about Kepler, about the golden section, and about sacred geometry, and they can completely, make you drunk with their stories. But for our concerns, what drives this desire for the Holocaust upon this beautifully built stage, those questions for me are more interesting, and they go straight to the core of what are we doing here? What is the point of all of this?
Yeah, I think people can hear you talk like that and still probably underestimate. It brings me to my core, that, and just to go back to Plato for a second, he just thought these pre-Socratics who are probably in the initiatory tradition, partially buried in mud, and they have these kind of visions. They were having an encounter with reality, and the next one derivation away, they were spinning yarns about kind of reality. And again, you're saying this Apollonian piece is kind of giving us all this theory, and it's beautiful and it's crystalline, but it's so all encompassing that we miss the fact of the hecatomb, of the bloodshed all around us, and that this is kind of your life's work, is it not? Just to kind of redirect our attention to the reality, that there's people dying in mass numbers. There's wars about to happen, and so forth. Am I right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. It's what we're interested in. But in a way, it's like the people who study the Apollonian tradition, they do that all their life, and they are, some of them are deep believers. They are actually some of the strongest believers, because they read the book of nature written by God, and they can read it better than most, and so they feel connected to God in their way. And so all these other issues about violence and about bloodshedding and all that, they don't even concern themselves with them.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like I was watching a documentary about Debussy, right? The composer. And Debussy says that, for him, his object was to translate nature into music, and everything else didn't really concern him at all. And so you can do that. You can live a life where you can still believe, that there was a divine mind that created the stage, and that's that.
Yeah. Fascinating. So then let's do kind of another one. It's we're going to bounce through, in that letter to me and other places, Dr. Saint Thomas Aquinas, doesn't rate too highly in your canon. What's your experience with him? And this is a fun one too, because the church today is kind of, experiencing its every so often its episodic battles between Thomas, Neo-Thomas and everybody else and so forth. You're very exposed to him. Where do you see the shortcomings there?
No, I don't know. To be honest with you, I haven't. The Summa, I kind of read. I went through it many years ago, and for me, the only thing I remember from that thing was it was just Aristotle, and then he took that and then he put God and Christ in it, and I thought, is that all? I mean, you could be sued for plagiarism. I mean, if the Aristotelian society was, but maybe I'm wrong, but. Yeah. As a young guy reading this stuff, I said, well, it's the same thing, the one engine and this and that, and plus, and then there was all that long aspect of his work on freedom and free will, and it was just as unconvincing as everything else. And so I didn't understand that once we were amongst grown-ups and talking about politics, the Catholics in the room would still, harken back to all of that and then express their opinions of policy based on Thomas. And I thought either I'm not understanding something or they're completely on a pack of imbeciles, but maybe it's just
Rabelais' take on him, and it's deeper than this, but at one level, we have to realize what, through parody, we see it so clearly, but in the works of Rabelais, you see that he makes it so clear to you that with 3 or 4 moves in a syllogism, you can prove anything about anything, And so that was a great send up that when I read St. Thomas still has some merit, that give me like 5 or 6 syllogisms and I can convince you of the craziest stuff. And there was deeper critiques in Rabelais too. He saw it all around him and he heard this argot, the strained language being spoken with such authority during his time. And he was somebody else, very connected to nature, a great sensate, somebody who appreciated the body, and he just could not. He had to rebel so strongly against it.
No, it's interesting. You would quote.
How about Machiavelli? I'm going to quote you. Machiavelli, his depiction of cynical opportunism, and this is from your essay on Sicilianizing our Weltgeschichte, of which the Anglo-Saxon mainstream is so gluttonous, reeks of an unimaginative mechanicality, I'm so sorry, which does full injustice to the deeper and nauseating nature of evil as it manifests itself in the collective motions of mankind. Do the learned doctors of academia really believe that knowledge of Machiavelli's The Prince is a sine qua non for fathoming the essence of power? What did you find in Machiavelli? We love him, right? Because we think, I mentioned the distinction between the real and the logical world and our models and the real world. And now we tend to read Machiavelli because we think finally he's showing us about the real world, right? And so we love that stuff. And you're saying still ish, kind of quite different. What's going on with Machiavelli, Guido?
Yeah, It's like in the Anglophone world, they read Machiavelli and they think that they have, that they have just gulped the Renaissance and they understand everything. I don't know. I mean, the Renaissance is a very complex time. And there are things that are extremely hard to read. If you try to read Giordano Bruno and all those esotericists, or Cardano, and those are people that were versed in all sorts in a lore that's completely lost. Machiavelli is not like that. Machiavelli is blunt. He's very simple. I mean, it's very basic. Mm-hmm. And recently there was this book written by this guy named Jonathan Green, 48 Laws of Power. It was a bestseller. I don't know. You must have heard of it. Anyway, it's a New York Times bestseller. Yeah, it's just Machiavelli. I mean, it's simple and it very, very much resonates with the some kind of a, low business ethos about getting ahead and all that. And so it chimes with it. It echoes that. So it's popular. But I don't know. I mean, it's trivial. It's extremely trivial, and so I don't know. It's of no use to me. The only thing that I remember of Machiavelli is the one about the. Sorry about the lights.
No problem.
The only thing that I can remember is the one about lying. That one is kind of okay, like, always lie. When you're caught,
No, it's kind
like
of okay.
red-handed, lie.
Uh-huh.
Lie always, because there's always going to be at least one person that's going to believe you. That one was more chilling. The rest, meh.
Yeah.
Does that really, can you really go far with that in understanding our world? No.
Yeah.
But the one about lie always that one's okay.
Uh-huh.
Kind of okay.
Okay.
That's the one song out of his record that I saved. The rest I just.
Yeah. I think
I wouldn't
go ahead.
I wouldn't burn the vinyl completely. You can have it in your collection, but if you want to listen to a song, just listen to that one, because the rest is just.
And I don't think many of our listeners are like hanging their whole intellectual life on Rousseau. I guess I've had to teach the social contract through humanities, when I've taught it. I confess to what you find a lot of his work, he's one of these guys who on Scattered Pages, even in the social contract, he's making distinctions between like association and agglomerations. So this kind of the worst is the corruption of the best thing that I like from one of my heroes, this Ivan Illich, who, by the way, has a great essay on Savonarola I'll send you. That Rousseau, for me, one insight again, now rip this apart. Oligarchy, democracy works for small entities, oligarchy for mid-sized entities, autocracy for large entities. He got into some notions of scale that are important to me. So I always kind of liked sharing that I think scale is important, not talked enough about. There's a guy, Leopold Kohr, who I think should be in a canon, The Breakdown of Nations. He just says the enemy of everything is bigness. And I get some real insights from that. Tell me about your reaction to Jean-Jacques Rousseau.
When I read Rousseau in school, I always wondered, I kept falling asleep, and I said, what is this garbage? And
the
what
second most read book after the Bible at that time, wasn't it?
My goodness, yeah,
possibly. Some years ago, when
and
I was teaching them, I read something that it's up there. Go ahead, yeah.
The people surrendering their will to in order to have order, and then they were good at the beginning, and I thought, what is this inane thing, and most importantly, what does that have to do with the French Revolution?
Uh-huh.
And people, what do you mean? That's the book that informed the French Revolution. This is no Robespierre and all those, the head cutters. They had this book in their in their pockets, much like the Bolsheviks had Marx in theirs, and it's like the books that drives complete mystification.
Yeah.
Again, Ferrero. Lombroso is Guglielmo Ferrero, is a politologist that's been completely forgotten. But
how is his last name spelled, Guido?
Ferrero, Ferrero.
Okay.
And he's written this decent book, called Potere, Power. And in this book, he says, and finally, I wasn't that young when I read it, but I thought, damn it, I wish I'd read this sooner. He says, Rousseau has absolutely nothing to do with the revolution. This guy wrote this book. It was a pamphlet that was commissioned to him to support the moneyed oligarchy in Geneva.
Huh.
And he came up with this fiction that was there to somehow provide these oligarchs with a politically correct manifesto of sorts, which could help them in their cause, or just the cause of the canton or the city of Geneva in its some kind of drive for more independence and whatnot. And I thought, and that makes sense, because otherwise, but you'll see that even when you read Proudhon, he says that Rousseau is important and that the Jacobins listen to him, that the revolution was a good thing, that it went astray with the terror. And for as much as I like Proudhon, I mean, there's a lot of mystification about all of this.
Yeah.
And so I don't believe that the revolution had absolutely anything to do with Rousseau. They couldn't, zero. Much like the Bolshevik Revolution has absolutely nothing to do with Marx. What they needed, however, once they were enabled to become regimes, you need a book. You need a written discourse. And so it'd be interesting to see why these particular books lend themselves, because they had the shape and that was at the time was fitting for giving them some kind of propagandistic rhetorical presentability, and so they did. And at that point, then they make us read the books as if the books sparked that, but absolutely not. It's a complete lie. Again, they don't want you to understand how transformations in society and upheavals in power are really orchestrated. And so they make you believe that these books are out there and they work like seeds, and then they grow and people, latch on to them, and then they all rally to some kind of cause and change things. It's another complete mystification.
Yeah. How about this? You name some other books that you think are popular and you just think confuse us more than they illuminate us.
Yes, Marx for sure. Marx, yeah, I have enormous beef with Marx, and it's difficult for me because I have a lot of friends and acquaintances, well-meaning scholars who come from that camp, but for me, it's part of a deceit. Marx for sure. All the neo-Austrian schools.
You called Marx controlled opposition in our last conversation, I think.
Yes, he definitely is.
That's how much you think he's obfuscating, yeah.
But it's not even him. I mean, for as much as I detest him on a personal level, because he is detestable, and especially in his spat with Proudhon, but whatever. But I mean, that a man had a hard life, and regardless if he had a difficult or an easy life, it's not him. It's what they made of him.
Yeah.
And because he died, he wasn't that famous. His book was not famous either. He died, I wouldn't say in semi-obscurity. He was kind of known as, he was a propagandist. It's the Council of the Nicaea syndrome. Who gets to tell you what to do, what to read, what is a good book and what is not a good book? Other books that have confused, I'm really afraid of saying things, afraid.
We like it when you start to get afraid to say things because you might offend.
No, because I'm gonna look like an idiot. For me, and it's not even to answer your question mostly. I was gonna say Dostoevsky, but Dostoevsky.
I was gonna mention him because in some of our correspondence, you see, I'm just picturing like Catholic young guys who, when we know we haven't explicated anything at one level, we can just kind of say like it's all there in Dostoevsky.
But Dostoevsky, I was reading Cioran, right? And Cioran, I mean, I like reading.
Now, who's that? Cioran, I said yes, but I got to confess my ignorance. Cioran.
No. Is this really dark Romanian French naturalized?
Oh yeah. I always said Cioran. Yeah, he's great, right?
Yeah. So yeah, great. And he worships Dostoevsky. He says,
so Cioran, Ciaron. I forget. No, Ciraon. Yeah.
Cioran.
His first name is Emile, I think, right?
Emile, yeah.
You said secretly everybody's just wanting to be praised. He cut right there.
Yeah, and it's all about revenge, and there's nothing wrong with revenge.
Yeah.
About all the no, but there's so much in it. We should have a talk about Cioran because he's phenomenal. And people say it's stuff that suicide-prone people read, and that's another cliche about him. For me, I'm not suicide-prone at all, and I read when I need to be galvanized, when I need comfort. I read Cioran. Imagine that.
Yeah.
So he makes me love life even more. So anyway, Cioran and many others, of course. Dostoevsky is the peak.
Yeah.
They say to you, everything's in there. a lot of top literati will tell you Tolstoy is good, but Dostoevsky is, so much deeper.
I think that's right. That's a common understanding. Yeah. Guilty as charged in some respects, but I haven't read either deeply.
To be honest with you, every time I attack Dostoevsky, I don't know if I told you this before, I want to repeat myself. This has happened to me repeatedly. I find myself, you say, oh, you got to read this, or read The Idiot, or read The Possessed, and read the next. Okay. I find myself page, I don't know what page, like 493, and say I dropped the book for about a few weeks because I just couldn't continue. Then I go back to it, and I'm thinking, who the hell is Elena Petrovna? And why is she slapping Vladimir Timofeyevich? And why are they in the room? And who is this other guy? And what is this book about? And I take this thing and I throw it away. I have not finished The Idiot. I have not finished The Possessed. And I don't know what people are raving about. But this is like Stendhal. Stendhal also.
I know a lot about Stendhal, yeah. He was Vinci's hero, so I've read it all. I kind of like him, I'll admit.
Whose hero was he?
It's Stephen Vinci. Put me on touch with Stendhal.
Okay, oh yeah, the Hungarian writer.
Yeah.
And my dad also is crazy for Stendhal, and he has this complete works of Stendhal. And in the back cover, it said, "The more you love Stendhal, the more intelligent you are." And I thought, I must be a moron.
It really said that, though? That's shocking. That's pretentious.
No, it was the curator of the edition.
Okay, yeah.
The editor said.
Mm-hmm. I could probably illuminate what I've learned. I haven't read that deeply in literature to know. So I've tended to read more in the canon within literature than I've read within nonfiction. Nonfiction, I've been completely on my own, and I have no stomach for stuff that doesn't help me understand the world. I wonder if I've been much more narrow. Well, I shouldn't say narrow, but I've probably just looking for suggestions. I've clung closer to the canon when it comes to fiction.
But I mean, you have no choice. You got to go by something that's recommended. You don't have 7 lives to go in a library and choose to read whatever you want. Looking for that Romanian treatise on sociology. How many years do you have to live before you find that book?
Yeah,
you got to go by, and this is why critics and the fathers of the Council of Nicaea have so much power, because they cut through the chase and tell you, just don't waste your time. I'll tell you what to read. I will tell you what it's going to make you a good believer, a good Christian, an educated man.
Yeah. A couple of things I want to accomplish before we end today is I want you to say, you've mentioned, we've had a show on anarchism with you, and you've mentioned some of your Malatesta and others. But how about give us some of your gems, like in your own canon that we may have never heard from, literature and everything. And then because we began talking about Zsa, let's, whether from your essay or not, give us some of the pearls of insights, that, when I read systematic philosophy, whether it's Hegel or something, all I'm looking for is insights. I like tasting the different atmospheres, but eventually I'm just looking for a little insight in my little corner of the world. So how about first, before we get into like Zsa, who are some of the other kind of hidden gems you found, especially ones that might be relevant today? And because 99.9% of our listening audience probably only speaks English, books they could pick up to start developing their own canon.
Yeah. Well, I mean, for me, the three anarchism, the three true anarchists that have not been incorporated in that tradition and ought to be there really in pole position that everybody should read are, as we mentioned them over and over again, are Veblen. So the Theory of the Leisure Class is for me is a book that it's not like Dostoevsky and you don't know what he's saying. You will. It's hard. But it's hard to read, but everybody gets it. So Veblen, everything by Veblen, especially that one, and Steiner. Steiner is fascinating, and everything by Steiner that one can lay his hands on is worth reading. He is, it's just mesmerizing. There's a mystic that has explored every avenue of knowledge and has said some unbelievable things about everything and original. And as I always say, even if it's made up, it's so good that you got to read it anyway. And it's gonna, and I don't think it's made up, but some of it is completely, I think, put together in a
But he'd be the
completely
first to admit that, I think is the point he would make,
yeah, it's been put together in such an idiosyncratic fashion, but definitely check it out. In Shasha, one of the books that most of his that was to me one of the most interesting was a book called The Theater of Memory, and it's an actual inquest. It's a journalistic inquest. It's not something he made up. It's not a work of fiction, and it's a story about I think a man who goes missing in World War One, and a double sees this fact, semi-delinquent, and goes to the family claiming to be the man who vanished.
This is like the story of Martin Guerre, if you're familiar with that. In
No,
French legend, Google it, like Wikipedia. There's a musical and a movie based on it. It's a true story where a guy went off to war, another kind came back and married his wife, and then gets killed.
it doesn't get killed, but that's exactly what happens.
Okay, Martin Guerre.
And
Yeah.
oh, you'll send
And
me.
in America,
send me,
there's a movie based on it, just for our listeners. They took the story of Martin Guerre and put it in the American Civil War in a movie called Summersby, which starred Jodie Foster, who was a teenage crush of mine, by the way. Okay.
I got to see it.
Yeah.
Well, that's exactly it. And that's great. You send me the link to that,
I will.
Mike. And so he goes back, and he obviously wasn't him, but he manages to convince the wife. The wife becomes the most adamant advocate of her husband's coming back from the dead or from the missing in World War One. And there begins a fight between those, the friends of the guy who just say, this is not him, and part of the family and a giant movement of public opinion that sides with this imposter. And the story is extraordinary. And Shasha is just a master of terseness. He dispatches the story in less than 100 pages, far fewer than 100 pages. He is bare bones. That's one of his characteristics. And the book is phenomenal, and it shocked me. And as I wrote in the article, it's about this fact of, who are we? If deep down we think we are so special, so unique, but what if there only were one amorphous life principle that is just pulsating through us, wearing different masks for each one of us?
Wow.
Which is kind of what emerges in John Carpenter's The Thing, right?
Yeah, right.
And and this story brings this very strongly. Here we are wondering about us, about you. You look yourself in the mirror, so who am I in your own body, and thinking of the day when you will have to forsake your body and not knowing anything, not knowing how your body really works or how you fit in it, and how confused you are about it all. And then you read these stories about maybe you are, Shasha, says, maybe you are nothing after all. Provocatively.
It is provocative. Yeah.
And
one more thing on Martin Guerre. There's a guy who did a musical based on it, who did Les Mis and Miss Saigon. But it must be a decent musical, because this got no reception. But I've listened to the soundtrack, and the key song is like, who is the imposter here? It's they use this type of story to talk about who's the imposter. The guy who, because it calls into judgment the lawyers, and you have Calvinists and Roman Catholics accusing each other and all this stuff. And then one person, kind of the town fool, I think, gets to say, like, who's the imposter, and calls out like the imposters of all of us. Now that's, again, a little bit cheesy, a little bit trite, but the power of this type of story, I bet you in the hands of Zsa can illuminate so many things, or at least help us ask the right questions.
No, and it was, a true story. And this was the time of the fascist regime. And I guess Mussolini, him directly, was not brought into it, but the regime was. They looked into this, and they also saw what behooved them to do, what side to support politically. It became a huge case. And it's a good
fascinating. So how about we end on this? We'll end on something kind of open-ended. But so I've known you for a long time. I think some people might think I have a proprietary relationship with you. We get lots of comments and people write to me like, oh, I got to talk to this Guido Preparata. And I think I don't mind it, by the way. I would never, ever lie. But some people presume like I've got some secret line to you and nobody else can get access. But anyhow, yeah, I saw your works. And I'll be honest, I could recognize uh, um, the Conjuring Hitler and the Tyranny. What's the book on tyranny?
Ideology.
Yeah, we've been talking about tyranny so much, the ideology of tyranny. And then again, I had the good fortune to review your book written with others on new directions in Catholic social and political thought. You have a website. There's all these, including the essay, Sicilianizing our Weltgeschung. But I obviously recognize genius in what you're doing. And so you're straining and you're striving to find lenses to understand what's going on, but in so many of our conversations, if people go back and listen to the previous podcasts we've done with you, Michael and I, and this one I've done at Front Porch with you, we're taking something like the COVID narrative, what's going on. And I don't hold this against you, but right now, something's up. A lot of people thought it was all good. There was an essay published in the Atlantic Monthly this week on, kind of amnesty, that obviously some of the things claimed were false. So everybody should just be hunky-dory. But in talking to you, you found all these new tools. You're trying to get something, and yet we're dealing with somebody, and I admire you for this, who still more often than other people, even more often than me, you never quite connect the threads before they're there. So with this whole COVID narrative, you still say, I don't know what went on. Am I right with that?
Yeah. I have not put it together just yet. I've been, and as we all have been, trying to put all the things together, and hopefully I will. I think, and I'll just say this very briefly, they have been trying to do this before with the avian flu. Yeah. And nobody talks about this anymore, but I've retrieved a number of books where the journalistic world accused the World Health Organization of having literally invented the pandemic to scare people, literally. And then this thing was just hushed up very fast and nobody spoke about it anymore. So they've been trying to do this. So we have some precedents. We have all the other precedents of how they put together the narratives taken from movies or from other stories that circulate about Ebola, which are exactly the same. So the script, the scare part, the inciting incident, and the language, all that's been in the works for a while.
And you worked with the Catholic Church in the Ebola crisis in Africa briefly, or had some connection?
No. I didn't work with them. I just attended a conference of Caritas, their charitable organization, where the team that went down there with the blessing of Caritas cleaned up the mess in Western Africa. And yeah, I mean, they were it came in they somehow confessed that they knew that there were military labs in the area doing shady things. Sure. But but the narrative of Ebola was the same. The story of the bat, which they circulated at the beginning of COVID, is exactly the same. So they've been telling us a movie that they've been playing before. Mm-hmm. What I yet do not understand is the story of the vaccination. And the thing that surprises me the most is the reaction in civil society. The fact that all these millions of doctors that there are that have had access to these vials, apparently virtually no one, except for this infamous or famous group of people in Almeria, Spain, who said, oh, there's graphene or whatnot. Except for them, nobody in the whole world has kind of stolen a cup and said, let me see what's in them. Or you have to steal more because maybe there are different batches. That's what strikes me, or that we have not known about that. If it is about that, but now we hear that it's not even about that. But anyway, no, I don't know.
Interesting. Yeah. I guess right now it's not like I have pieced it together, but early on you shared with me, we were corresponding in April of 2020, that it was, a lot of evidence that it was definitely leading to vaccine passports, and maybe, for me, now I can't put any words in your mouth on this, but most of it I see towards, just a general movement towards, use vaccines to get us to have to carry cards that can help us restrict travel. and then cashless society, social credit system, things like that. But that's I fly at 10,000 feet, and I don't get into the nitty gritty as well as you do. So I know I'm missing
No,
things, but
but
I guess I still
I've
have
heard.
my own kind of narrative. Yep.
No, I don't know. I mean,
Yeah.
my guess is good, and I don't have even a guess at this stage. But what I've heard this, somebody made this connection between COVID and cashless society. I don't see how the two are connected.
Okay. Yeah.
I maybe I'm missing the nexus, but why would they
I
need
think
to?
you would have a social credit score based on, how dutiful you are to, obeisance to the government if you do these things. But a cashless society comes in and you can be penalized when you don't, if you're getting trained in many ways just to march to the tune of the drummer, that you have this repeated thing, something there. But I'm admitting I haven't gone into the nitty gritty. My thing hasn't been piecing together the whole piece, but just always, smelling a rat. And then again, looking at alternative, great, wonderful scientists who are just, censored. That's my sense of injustice was aroused by the whole thing more than me trying to come up with the. I'm kind of like you. I don't pre-throw down a narrative too quickly, but smelling a rat from the get-go for sure. How about one more thing?
No.
Telling people that I talk about our correspondence at one time, and this essay is done. It will become a book. But you said you finally figured out 9/11. So tease that a little bit for our listeners and when they might be able to see that book and what it might be called.
Soon. It's called Phantasmagoria. I think the spectacle of 9/11 and the war on terror. It's ready. It was commissioned by a think tank in Dubai, and in the end, I guess they didn't want it anymore. I guess it didn't tell what they wanted to see. I have no idea. The communication just died after a while. But I completed it, extended it, and turned into a little book. Yeah, I'm personally very proud of it. The only thing that I'm not proud at all, and as I told you, is that it's taken me 20 years to come up with a thesis, a good one.
Only Guido
I think
will stay on the beat for 20 years.
it's unforgivable. I mean, it's not brilliant at all, isn't it? But I guess I could have, with hindsight, I could have put it together, but I just didn't. I just didn't. But now with the demobilization, and with the commission, I had to think about it, and then it came into. And then the thing came into relief, and it's coming out in a month or so, God willing.
Yeah, and people, Michael and I, when it comes out, we'll have you on again, hopefully around that time.
Yeah.
But if it comes out, we still won't have you back again for a few weeks. I'll be in touch with you, and we can let people know where to buy it, how to buy it, and things as soon as it does.
Sure.
Yeah. So you're in the process of a move. Good luck with that. You've got home remodels going on. Can't thank you enough again, Guido. Any other self-promotion things you could do at this point?
Well, I would like to say that my websites are being revamped, but they will be.
Okay.
And there's my 5 new books, 5 new titles. One of them is Conjuring Hitler in Italian, and Conjuring Hitler has been revised and expanded. Then there's a book on Empire and Church, 9/11, and a condensed version of Conjuring Hitler called The Incubation of Nazism. They're all under my own brand publishing house. And if, God willing, by the end of the year, they should all be on Amazon. So hopefully that will happen.
Well, you're an institution unto yourself. Can't thank you enough for coming on the Regeneration podcast again. Listeners, again, we'll have Michael Martin back next week.